a name of an individual that you absolutely are going to need to know, okay, if you don't already. And that is Gertrude Schultz Klink. Yes, she has a difficult name to spell. It's one of the reasons why we spend a bit of time to go through it together. Gertrude Schultz Klink. Make that a bit. Oh, sorry. It's gone a bit too close. Now, can anybody tell me what was the role of Gertrude Schultz Klink? Yes, Will? Good. Yeah, basically, she was the Nazi representative of women. So she was the leader of a group called the National Women's Front. Okay, sometimes known as a Frauenfront. But so she essentially is the national women's leader of Germany. Now, ultimately, this role that Gertrude Schultz Klink has is to be the symbol of what women are to be in Germany. But it isn't just it isn't just what she looks like. It's also about the role that she does. And we'll come on to a little bit later about why she is such an important person. We've also got a group that I want to share. And as I said, main people and organizations. You might want to just add that there. So that makes a bit more sense. We've also got a group called the German Women's Enterprise. And they're really important because they oversee all women's groups in Germany. Now, we've seen this before in our study of Germany. It's a common move is to make somebody in charge and represent, okay? Whether it is with youth, whether it is with propaganda, whether it is with the church. We bring it all under the control of like a government ministry. And that's what Gertrude Schultz Klink is basically doing. And she is going to be in charge as the National Women's Leader of Germany. She's going to head this group called the German Women's Enterprise. Okay. Now, so far, we're looking at women, but we also need to be familiar with girls. So if we do the ages, we've got 10 to 14. We've got 14 to 18. 18 to 21. 21 plus and 21 plus. There's 5 groups there who are focusing on that move from childhood to adulthood. Probably the most well-known is the League of German Maidens. But which age group does the League of German Maidens cater for? Which one of those? Have a chat with the person next to you, and then I'm going to see what you know.
young women would be 18 to 21, wouldn't it? Young women.
Okay, time up. Show of hands. If you think it's 10 to 14, put your hand up. 14 to 18, 18 to 21, 21 plus. Brilliant. It looks like we have done our work, guys. Very good. Okay, so that's the League of German Maidens. Now, they are the most well-known, and essentially they are the ones that I would say to be properly prepared for a question looking at the policies towards women and girls. You have to know them. Okay, Deutsche Mädchen. There are 5 others, which I think is, again, for those of you who are pushing for those higher levels, that you might be able to show your knowledge by including where relevant. You've got the Young Girls League, which is the 10 to 14. (18 to 21), the Faith and Beauty Society. Wow, sounds like a wonderful group. Incredibly dull. Now, the 21 plus are actually, I think, probably a bit more relevant than Young Girls League and Faith and Beauty Society, because you've got the Women's Front, sometimes known as the Frauen Front. And the Women's Front is an organisation dedicated to, as you can imagine, to women's issues and women's place in society. And we've also got the Reich Mothers Service, which is committed to supporting and helping and advising mothers. Okay. Now, at the risk of finding myself branded a Nazi apologist, which I hope by now you've worked out that I'm very much not, but it is important to maybe show a little bit of recognition that not all of what the Nazis did was necessarily bad, because something like the Reich Mother Service is there to support mothers in their lives and what they're trying to do. And take it from someone who knows, bringing up kids is really, really hard. So having people who you can turn to, particularly in those early days, a baby, why are they crying? I've been through all the different things I think it could be, and none of it's doing any better. That's really, really hard to deal with. So the fact that they have recognized this and are trying to make the difficulties of motherhood that little bit easier is a good thing. What I would say is less of a good thing is that it's all about motherhood, and we'll come on in a moment as to why that is significant, as opposed to, as you could probably work out, they weren't quite so keen on men taking a role in bringing up their children. Now, the next bit we're going to have a look at is probably the one which you might find the trickier to fill in. I was tempted to turn around and just leave you cold on this, but I actually think at the very worst, it's reassurance that we go through it together, but also I don't really see great benefit in you sat there panicking at this stage over things you don't know. I'd rather make sure you're clear on what you do need to know. So we're going to look at the key dates and events. Now, this isn't the key dates and events of all of Nazi Germany. This is key dates and events relating to their policy and attitudes towards women and girls. Now, I'm not suggesting, and I think I'm going to share roughly about 10 with you. I'm not suggesting these are the only ones that happen. And if I don't cover one that you think, oh, hang on, in my revision, I think that's really important, don't assume from me not including in this list that it's not important. Okay, what you know is good knowledge. What I'm trying to focus on is these are the 10 or so things that I think you definitely need to be familiar with. Okay, now the first one actually starts outside of our 33 to 39 Nazi life in Nazi Germany process. So this is before the Nazis get into power, but I think it's important, which is in 1931, the Nazi Women's League is established. Okay, so this is specifically an organization with, as you can probably work out, aimed at having a female-led part of the political party of Nazi Germany. Okay, which might seem at odds with some of their views towards women, which we may come on to shortly. Now, when we move into 1933, what's changed compared to 1931 to 1933? What's different now, Alfie? In terms of the Nazi Party, how is their circumstances different in 1933 compared to what they were in 1931? I think they're certainly more popular, and their popularities enabled them to get where? That's okay. We'll get there, Kezia. They're in power now. Okay, so have nice and clear in your head from that February 1933, the Nazis are in power. Not to try and put you on the spot there, Alfie. This is just the idea. It's what this is for. So don't worry about being a bit concerned about the dates and stuff. It just helps to have a bit of a chronological view. So from 1933, we see policies from the Nazis which are clearly aimed at trying to promote their beliefs in women and also restrict those opportunities for women that they've gained in the 1920s. So, for example, really early in the game, in 1933, we get the Law for the Encouragement of Marriage. Okay. Now, we'll come on to what that means a bit later on. But in essence, as you can probably work out and hopefully can remember from some of the revision you've done over Easter, we're talking here about the loans towards to help people who are starting out as a new marriage, to help them pay for their wedding, to afford for the fact that the woman is going to stay at home. And that's where all those things that we'll come on to later, the Mother's Cross and that sort of thing. Yes, Oliver?
Like they don't have to pay back their loan if they have kids.
Yeah.
How long does that last for? Like, when would they have to start paying back the loan?
It varied, but generally very few ever had to pay it back. And that's one of the issues that we get to when we get to the later 1930s, when they're worried about the economy. So it certainly wouldn't be within the first 4 or 5 years of marriage. Okay, good question. Also in 1933, we get the sterilisation law, which means, and this is building into those Nazi beliefs of racial beliefs in particular, that if they are deeming a woman to be unfit to be a mother, possibly through mental health issues, genetic diseases, etc., then they can order for that woman to be sterilised. So to stop her from being able to have a child. Okay? Grim stuff. Also, in 1933, we get the the establishment of a concentration camp specifically for women. This is at Moringen. So Moringen concentration camp or labour camp opens. Okay, Moringen is specifically for women, and obviously those women who are acting against what the Nazis want. Okay, so 1933, the fact that this is done in that first year of the Nazis being in power, in the first few months, what might we be able to infer from that about the importance the Nazis place on the role of women in society? The fact that they act on it within the first few months. Megan, any ideas? No. So they could focus on, right, we're going to rebuild the military. Right, we're going to deal with Jews in society. But actually, one of the main things they focus on here is passing legislation about women and marriage. Miriam? Poppy?
Is it possible to encourage them to have more children so that the new generation is more indoctrinated?
Good. So if they're going for that, and you can't do everything at once, if they're putting that in front of other ideas, what word beginning with P might we use? Priority. Good. So we can infer, and this might be something for you to think about in terms of what you're going to need to do in your assessments next week, is this is a good example of the Nazi policy towards women. They felt it really mattered. They make this a priority to bring in this legislation and make these changes. So they feel that the role of women in society in Germany is something they need to change quickly. Now, there's lots of different reasons for this. And there's lots of different aspects to this that become very important. For example, also in 1933, which is a big year for all this stuff, we get women banned from professional jobs. So that's things like teaching, like legal jobs. So they're actually moving to remove women from those jobs. Why? Ben, can you give me a reason why the Nazis in 1933 are passing a law to remove women from those jobs? Okay, good. So we want to have those women focused on a different role than being a professional. Oliver, why us?
Almost like indoctrinate them is the right word, to make them feel like that's their main job.
Good. So we're focusing on what the women's job is. The word job's very important here, but in a slightly different context. If women are removed from those professions, what happens? Joe?
Man gets a job.
Man gets a job. And what's the big problem in Germany in 1933? Unemployment. Okay, so this is clever. Well, you know, obviously we might disagree with the morality of it, we might disagree with what the Nazis are trying to do here, but it's quite a clever move, because by removing women from these positions, they are indoctrinating. They're also making sure that women's role is very clearly defined, but you're suddenly creating 360,000 is the amount of women who leave those jobs. 360,000 new jobs available for unemployed men to take on. So in dealing with the unemployment, and it's important, I think, not just to think of all these different policies in isolation. I know what you're looking at and what you're being assessed on next week is going to be policy towards women, but don't lose sight of how it fits into the whole. Because the thing that the Nazis promised above all else, when they came into power, people voted for them to deal with the economic depression. That's why people who otherwise wouldn't have voted for them voted for the Nazis. So they're looking at a way here to help with that, whilst also being able to push their ideological view of women's role in society. It is clever. I don't like it, obviously, but it is clever. Okay. Right. 1934 is when the German Women's Enterprise, which is referred to in the main people and organizations, is when that is set up. Again, fitting into this period of what we call consolidation of the Nazis, where they are bringing all different parts of society under their control. So the German Women's Enterprise, which brings all the different women's groups under their control, is completely consistent with what they do in religion, with what they do in culture and propaganda. Okay. Now, into 1935, that wasn't me struggling with the order, just to make sure I haven't missed anything with 1934. 1935, we get the Lebensborn program being established. Now, the Lebensborn program, which tends to stick in people's minds, is the program the setup where women who are unmarried are impregnated by SS, racially pure SS men. So it's basically a baby making setup, okay, which is very strange, but is in response to what? Why go through this trouble? What's motivating this move to have unmarried mothers who were supposed to be promoting motherhood and families being impregnated by SS men? What's the purpose of it, Luca? Millie? Yep. Fantastic. Okay. So it's about they want more children, they want more babies to indoctrinate, to fight in a future war. Because remember, nothing is set here that there's going to be World War II at the end of the 1930s. The assumption is that it's going to come much later than that. By setting it up, it means that it's a sign that the Nazis are concerned about the birth rate. They still want more babies. To the extent that the Lebensborn program really goes against the messages of the Nazis about women. They have such a push on marriage and being a husband, a wife, and the family unit, yet just 2 years into their time in power, they're creating a program which is literally creating babies without married parents. So again, the priority, to use a really good word from Toby, the priority here is clearly the birth rate rather than the idea of marriage being important. Okay. Also in 1935, I'll just double check. Or is that it for 1935? No, I think that's it for 1935. Just going to double check one thing quickly, because in my own writing, I've confused myself. Okay, right. No, that's it for 1935. Just checking I'm right. 1936. Again, specifically towards women. No longer allowed to be judges or to sit on a jury. Okay, so obviously it's a push to remove women from the legal profession, but that's already kind of been in place. But there's also a suggestion that in this we're trying to remove women from decision making of any kind outside of focusing on their home and their family. Now, 1936 is an important year because 1936 is when the drums of war, that's a terrible drum impression, the drums of war begin to beat. We have the reoccupation of the Rhineland. Now, I know this isn't stuff that you've needed to study because we don't do the foreign policy, but from the economic policy of the Nazis, from what they're trying to do, suddenly it's becoming clear that they need to rearm. And they're going to rearm. This is a time when Goering takes over as in charge of the economy. And all of the efforts of German society is now to be focused on rearmament. And that is going to have a significant impact on policy towards women. Because no longer is the priority that we saw in 1933 of all about women being married, having children, and not going to work. We actually see women's position change quite significantly. We see the Nazis really change their approach towards women because now they realize they need women in work. They need every able-bodied person who can work to the war effort supporting it. So in 1937, I think is a really important year for showing that Nazi policy towards women isn't as effective as might have been expected. Because we get the duty year law passed. This is the law that says, just like national service, the idea of being called up to join the army, women are required to do a year of work. So this is actually about getting women out of the home to go and work. Okay. Also in 1937, we get the marriage loans are abolished. So this idea from 1933 of being encouraged by law to get married and start a family and give up your job, the main incentive for doing that, which was government giving you money to help you, is gone. Okay, no more big move to stay at home and have babies. And that's gone for two reasons. Reason one, because we need the women to work. We need to focus on rearmament. Reason two, because of the war effort, they can't afford to be paying out this money, literally be paying somebody not to be contributing to the war effort. It's more of a short-term thinking because they still want the birth rate to be high, but it's this recognition that actually we're going to need to be ready for war earlier than we previously expected. In 1933, I would say, and this is the Patterson interpretation, if you like, in 1933, if you were to ask Hitler, Goebbels, Himmler, when would you foresee there to be a world war, they would be talking about late 1940s, early 1950s, at the earliest. They certainly did not in 1933 anticipate that they would need to be ready for a war within 10 years. Whereas by the time we get to the mid-1930s, it's starting to become apparent that war is looking likely and war is going to come earlier. Okay? So that leads to this change in priorities. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the Nazi requirement for a high birth rate has gone. If anything, it's become more important because one thing you can guarantee from any kind of war is that you're going to take a hit to the population. Okay? So what the Nazis do at this stage in 1938 is they are very keen to continue to promote having children. They have put so much effort into making it clear that for women to have children, they should really be married, that they decide that they are going to make it easier for people to get divorced so they can then remarry and have children. The circumstance in which you are now allowed to get divorced is if the mother, the wife, sorry, I shouldn't say mother, the wife or the husband is unable to have children. Okay, so you know that happens, is very common. Some people choose not to have children. Some people physically are unable to have children. But what the Nazis do is they make it now, it's possible to divorce your husband or for the husband to divorce their wife if they're not able to have children together. Okay? So divorce from 1938, divorce possible if wife or husband unable to have children. Now, the reason you need to know that, and the reason why ahead of next Tuesday you're going to need to spend some time to learn and know the order of events, is it's really important. Because if you are talking about, for example, if you're analysing a source from 1937, you need to know what has happened before that point in Nazi policy, and also what happens afterwards. If you're looking at a source from 1934, that's going to indicate Nazi policy at that time, which is definitely very different to Nazi policy after 1936. This will become even more important when you come to your interpretations question, which we do have a lesson between your sources question next Tuesday and your interpretations question the following week. But the interpretations question is obviously, as they all do, going to be asking you to look at some interpretations and have your view. Do you agree with it in terms of the success, the effectiveness of Nazi policy? So you're going to need to know what that policy is, what were their aims. Okay? So that's really important to know, the order. And flashcards, the good old-fashioned, I know it doesn't sound great fun, but having a look at it, then trying to write that out from memory, checking what did you get right, what did you get wrong. It's a simple tool. It might not be massively fun, but it's very effective. Okay? And that's something that I urge you to do in terms of your preparation. Now, we've got the 4 key questions on your big sheet. The first key question that we're going to have a look at, just bring it through here. And I want you to write this key question where it says key question is, what qualities did Nazis look for in an ideal woman? Which sounds like the start of a dating reality TV show, but it isn't. So what qualities did Nazis look for in an ideal woman? Now, you've probably got some ideas about this anyway, hopefully, but it's quite helpful to have them just clear so you can then evaluate whether Nazi policy is showing that they are focused on this or other issues. So, first of all, plain appearance. No makeup. The heavily made up women of the Weimar era, no, they don't want that. Okay. Long hair, preferably blonde. Okay, we know that from the idea of the Aryan race, this Nazi idea of blonde, blue-eyed being best. Non-smoker. Again, this has nothing to do with health at all. Yes, Joe. I'm not allowed to let you out, I'm afraid. We've only got 10 minutes. Non-smoker, meaning that they obviously, it's not health reasons that, it's the fact that it is associated with the independent women of the Weimar era. So non-smoker, they haven't worked out that smoking is medically bad for you, which obviously now we know it is. Non-worker. Okay, so not having a job. They don't go out to work. Responsible for all household duties. Okay, the cooking, the cleaning, all the different aspects are expected to be done by the woman in their ideal. supportive and obedient towards husband. Okay. Dinner on the table when they get home. Make the husband's life as comfortable as possible, because he's going to be doing very important jobs and work for the fatherland. Yes. It could be a very short period, as sometimes. I don't think that made a massive difference. But what certainly did happen is there would be relationships which they got married much quicker because of the marriage loans, because they realised it's in their interests too. So certainly there's a move, not necessarily a big push on how long they're together, but definitely a move to get married younger than they might have done before. Okay. Unsurprisingly, produce, and I use that word because that is how they saw it, baby factory, produce several children. That's the ideal they're looking for. Married to a pure German husband. So not married to a Jew, not married to a Negro, not married to what they call a Mischling, somebody who has Jewish blood in them. Okay. And finally, obedience and respectful of the governments. They don't really want women to be politically active, because there's no roles other than Gertrude Scholz-Klink in being in charge of women. There's no women in the Nazi government. So they're not interested in sort of women looking to play a role in the political side of the Nazis. That's not women's role. They should stay out of politics, but they should be obedient and respectful to the government. So they accept what they're told and recognize that it's not their place to be thinking about other stuff. Okay, right. On to probably a juicier key question, really, which is how the Nazis go about encouraging women and girls to focus on being wives and mothers. So, how did the Nazis encourage women and girls to focus on being wives and mothers? So what we're going to do, we're going to start, I mean, we might even finish this box actually, but we can carry on with the rest on Monday. Okay, but what we're going to look at is we're going to look at what do the Nazis do, first of all, to encourage this movement towards being wives and mothers. And then what we'll do next lesson is that we'll look at how the Nazis, what did they do to discourage women from being independent and in control of their lives. Okay, so there's kind of two facets to it. What the Nazis do to create women's mindsets as being as they want them to be, and also what do they do to stop women from being able to go against what they want. Okay, you need to know those two sides before you can then start to evaluate the effectiveness. So first of all, we've got propaganda. Propaganda promotion of the Nazi ideal. Now we've got the 1933, I'm just going to call it marriage law. The full name you can find in your key dates and events, but I think marriage law is sufficient for now. Includes loans with reduced repayments based on number of children produced. Okay. We then get, if there's one thing that you would say about Adolf Hitler, he's a lovely son. He's a very caring, nostalgic man. And it's Hitler who awards the Mother's Cross, always on his mum's birthday. And the Mother's Cross is awarded to women of large families. And there are different levels of Mother's Cross, which you would have come across, the bronze, silver, and gold. So Mother's Cross awarded to women with large families who really have fired out those children on Hitler's mum's birthday. No, that's sweet. Now, one reason why women need to work is because they need money. Very few people would do their job were they not getting paid for it. Okay? Hopefully, ideally, and I wish this upon all of you, you get to do a job that you like. I'm very fortunate. I love my job. But I do it to get paid because I need money to survive. So what the Nazis actually do is that they offer financial support, which you might describe as a family allowance. So some money that they get given, usually monthly, to support low-income families. They don't want the women from a low-income family to have to go to work. They would rather pay the woman to stay at home. Now, the desk on Ruby. Yes, yeah, exactly that sort of thing. Okay. Now, crucially, we start to see, and again, you can compare this with your chronology, your timeline, that as the focus starts to move towards war, there's a recognition that probably becoming mothers is more important than being wives. The mother aspect becomes more important. So this is where we get Lebensborn set up. To increase the birth rate through impregnation by racially pure SS men. Now, as part of this move for motherhood, we also have the GWE, the German Women's Enterprise. Comes in just a moment. Arranges classes and radio programs on motherhood, which, you still get today now. Podcasts, I guess. Podcasts, radio shows, such to help you with your parenting. Yes, no. No, there would be single, racially pure, young, vigorous. There's all kinds of different words I could use, which are perhaps inappropriate, but you get the idea. Yes, Oliver?
They have anything to do.
No. they go through the pregnancy,
Yeah.
and there literally were like creches, like daycare, where they were brought up by proper Fraulines, more like grandmothers, women who are no longer able to have kids themselves. And once the babies were past the age, the SS men had nothing to do. They wouldn't know who their kids were. Okay. And we also get, only a couple more, guys, that's the home economics and let me put PE, so it's better, isn't it, than athletics? And PE increased in schools for girls. And of course, the divorce law, 1938, makes it easier for women to leave barren, which is a horrible term, but basically means that they haven't had children, to leave barren marriages. And finally, in terms of, what the Nazis are really pushing and promoting, and I'm sure this has come up in your revision and is quite a nice, easy one to remember, is Kinder, Küche, Kirche, which always sounds gloriously Scouse. Küche. Okay, now what we're going to have a look at together next week, next Monday, is we will have a look at the other two, and then we will do some specific focus on the source question. Please take it home with you, but make sure also that it comes back with you on Monday. On our lesson on Thursday, remember, you're going to have a go at your Edwards question. If you have any questions about that, either now or before Thursday, please do find me. Or just drop me an email. And as I said, if you have other revision that you need to do for a subject later that day, by all means have that with you in